So welcome to the Grow with Ryan Magic podcast. Today I'm here with a really special friend, a mentor of mine, Renee Slansky. So welcome on. It's so great to have you here. And go for it.
Thank you. I'm excited. I was, when you messaged me, because obviously we've known each other for, I think
Maybe
4 or 5 years now. Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, we have not had a good catch up and a good talk in absolutely ages. So I'm really excited.
Yeah. And as I mentioned just before, I do this just as much for my own enjoyment and my own joy, because I love having these conversations, as I do for all these beautiful listeners that are tuning in as well. So there's so many things that I'm looking forward to asking you since it's been ages since we've done mentoring, and I'm fresh out of a relationship. So
Yeah. And it's funny because I've seen your growth right from the start. When I first met you and you were just getting out of that relationship at that time and going through a breakup. And I've seen you have this, not even just personal transition through your relationships, but also through your businesses and things like that. So for me, it's been sometimes I watch from a distance and I check in on you and I don't know if you know that. And I'm just like, I just like to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's been awesome to be able to watch you develop over this time.
Thanks, Renee. I really feel your support. Yeah, I really have. I've noticed that you check in and see how I'm going, and I appreciate that. So there's lots of things that I want to ask. Obviously, you're a fantastic expert in personal development and mindset coaching, but also like very specifically with dating coaching and relationship coaching. So there's such a broad spectrum of things that you can talk to, and I'd like to ask questions in both of those categories. And I'd also really love to even talk a little bit about your personal journey in business. So we've got lots of things we could talk about. What I'd love to kick off with is about just so at the moment I'm fresh out of a relationship. Obviously you knew Danny as well, amazing soul. And we've been really lucky to be conscious enough to have the most beautiful conscious uncoupling you could possibly have, which is just really lucky. And we've got each other's support. But now we're both legitimately talking to each other about who we want to attract and what we've learned from the relationship at some point in the future. And we can have these open conversations. I'd love to know for you, what advice would you give someone when they're just come out of a relationship and they have the intention of attracting someone at some point in the future? What do you think are some of the key pieces of advice you'd give someone, aka me, coming fresh out of a relationship?
I think if you've just come fresh out of a relationship, there's going to be things to process that you're not aware of and that only time will reveal. And it doesn't matter how much conscious thinking that you're doing or how much emotional maturity you have, there still is a process to be able to have. We can accelerate processes, but there's still a process. There's still a way to go through. And I think that there's
sorry to jump in. Is that somatic? Because for me, like meaning like in your body, because so say for example, in my case, I've created space, like taken myself away and just create some space to allow for things to come up. Emotion has come up naturally without any space, and I've cried and gotten sent, spoken through things with friends, and like it's been a lot of anxiety coming up for me recently, and it doesn't feel relevant to the relationship, but I feel like it's relevant to certain parts of myself that I may have suppressed in the relationship, or certain parts of me that I never really saw when I was in a relationship. So I kind of feel like it's relevant to the growth or what that relationship allowed me to do with my own growth journey, but not necessarily directly to do with the romantic relationship and the loss or the grieving of the relationship. That makes sense.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that anxiety is a signal, and those signals are obviously triggered by circumstances. It's like when your brain goes into stress mode, okay, which is anxiety. It's basically a mode to be able to keep you alive, right? It's like when people have panic attacks, your brain sees something and it magnifies it to work out, okay, why is he freaking out? Why is she freaking out? And then it makes everything heightened more so. when we experience anxiety and we don't necessarily know where it's coming from or why am I feeling that, because we feel like we have a sense of control or understanding over the situation, most of the time it's deep-rooted fears which have been triggered by events or circumstances. And it's all mainly coming from that unconsciousness. Now, this might be things that you've experienced in your childhood, which have then been triggered by change.
Yes.
Okay. Doesn't necessarily have to be triggered by a person. Sometimes it can be triggered by change. And in your mind, you think, well, hang on a second, I'm not feeling anything bad against her. I'm feeling totally okay. Why then am I feeling, and I'm totally okay with this situation, why then am I feeling some sort of anxiety about it? And it's not necessarily because of her or the situation. It's more because of the change and the growth that's coming from this, which could be triggering things that you have felt when you've gone through other stages of growth, you know, when you were going through your first major breakup, or when you were going through transitioning into your first business and stepping out of your comfort zone and all this sort of stuff. It can be triggering something that your brain recognizes as, hang on a second, there's change here, there's growth here. And your brain obviously has a neurological pathway, and it's something that you have to learn. Neurological pathways or your preferences never go away. Okay. They're always there. The only difference is that we have the power of choice, the power to choose, I'm going to think this way instead, or I'm going to choose
with
this.
awareness, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But your preference is something that will always be there. Now, whether you decide to allow your preference to drive your life or conscious thinking to drive your life, that is obviously what will produce different results. And so what happens is you may not realize that certain preferences are then triggered by when you have events, hence why anxiety comes up and you're thinking, well, why am I feeling this? I'm actually okay with it. When really it's just, again, a neurological reaction.
So as an example of a preference in the way that you define a preference, like our personality, our ego is formed based upon how we were taught to show up and how we were nurtured as children. So for me, my preference is success and achievement because my dad recognized me when I achieved. That's my strategy. It's part of my personality. And I like a big part of me when I start to unravel that was like, okay, I start to shame that because I realized, I was like, whoa, this is something it was a preference. I didn't even realize that was driving me. I thought I had choice, but it wasn't actually choice in that moment because I was unaware of it. And then I started to shame it. I was like, whoa, there's this part of me that's just like this conditioning and these neural pathways that you're talking about that are firing without me even knowing what the hell. And I start to shame it. But I've since learned that it's okay to have. It just needs to be tamed and not shamed. But is this what you're talking to with preference? Like your
So
conditioning?
basically, your preferences are things that happen up until, I think it was until you're about 14 years old. Okay. So when you're 14 years old, we don't really like, you know, a lot of that is like us being a child, right? And so we're just subjected to our environment. We're subjected to whatever it is that our parents throw at us and whatever happens to us as a kid. And so that is forming all our decisions, our choices, our preferences, this sort of thing. And it's not until we become an adult that we have to almost unlearn some of the things that we've just been subjected to. And that's obviously where the power of choice comes in. And so what I find is that people get to a point in their life where either they're repeating the same cycles, whether it's in a relationship, or they have the same anxieties come up and up and up, and they're like, what's happening here? Why is it happening? And it's not that you're broken. It's not that, you know, there's something necessarily wrong with you. It's just you have been given this preference purely because of the circumstance or the family that you were born into, or whatever's happened to you during that time. And it's just created a scientific neurological pathway in your brain that goes, this equals this, this equals this. And it's like people who think, you know, abuse equals love. For people that have Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome, for people that don't know, is basically when someone that wounds you, someone that controls you, abuses you, and you see them as your savior. Right? Because your brain thinks, oh, this attention equals validation or equals love, even though it's really unhealthy, you know, and it becomes this preference. Now, obviously it isn't right. And that's what we have to do. We have to understand that just because we feel a certain way or do a certain thing, that doesn't have to be our identity. And so when I think it comes to a breakup, I think you have to allow yourself to go through the grieving process, because there will be a range of different feelings and emotions that will come through, which can be partly because of your preferences, and also partly because you're letting go of someone. Don't forget that when you've been in a relationship with someone, you have an attachment to them. You
Mm,
have a bond with them, especially if you've been sexually active with them. There is a spiritual bond, there is a chemical bond, there is a physical bond, all of that. And
mm,
so letting go of that bond is something that it takes time. And it
yes.
is something that your brain has to start to accept, because it's like you've had this drug and now this drug's been taken away, which is oxytocin, right?
Mm,
Oxytocin is released when women have sex, but it's only released for men when they have commitment.
mm.
So if you've had a
That's
committed
really
sexual
cool.
relationship with someone, that's your heroin, right, for your brain.
Mm,
And then you've had a partner. Not only that, you've been with her for obviously a couple of years, with me for a couple of years. And so it's kind of like, okay, when you've been in a relationship with someone for a couple of years, you have your way to think together. You have your own little nuances with each other, and it's
yeah,
almost
there's a
like
whole third entity there. It's like a whole third living
exactly,
being.
you
Yeah.
become one. You become
Yeah.
one. And so if you divide that one, there's going to be some sense of loss. There's going to be
Yes.
some sense of anxiety, confusion, processing.
Mm,
And I think it's important to sit with those feelings, to not necessarily wallow in those feelings, but definitely sit in those feelings. And I think that whilst you may have in your head, okay, well, what's the next sort of partner that I want? It's always good to be able to have some sort of idea of that. However, I don't think that you should necessarily engage in actively seeking that out straight away until you've given yourself minimum, I like to say, minimum 3 months of some sort of processing of the last relationship.
yeah. You mentioned heaps of really cool things there, by the way. I loved what you said about oxytocin being released from the woman's body when the woman has sex, and in the man's body when he actually commits. That's so true.
Mm,
And that's like such an
mm,
equivalent of like the intensity of what a big deal it is for a woman to have sex with a man, and in terms of
mm,
physically, their physiology, and what a big deal it is for a man to commit. It's that's really cool. And there was heaps of cool things you mentioned there. I remember last time when because you guided me through my last breakup uh, with
mm,
with my ex partner Katie,
mm, mm.
and I essentially left that relationship after being in it for 5 years. And I went out there like a couple of days later, and I approached like 30 women in the city and got like 8 phone numbers, and was just like, doo on on the tune. And you're like,
I
mate, you just
remember.
have to. Do you remember that?
Let's calm
Like,
down. Let's scale it down a bit.
yeah, you're like, you're not allowed to see anyone. But
Yeah.
I don't really feel. This is a true belief of mine. I don't feel like the chances are high of meeting your real, like for God or the universe to bring that divine partner into your life through you actively pursuing it with an attachment and some kind of like necessity to
Mm,
bring it in. I feel like,
mm,
and remember when I was dating the woman before Danny, the day
mm,
that I ended that relationship, I was thinking, all right, I'm going to have some space now. And on that day, I just
mm,
happened to meet Danny at a conference that I never thought, like it wasn't even something I could have controlled. It was just like, boom, she just popped in. And I was like,
mm,
that is crazy. Like when and I feel like that's usually my experience has been these really, the most special and amazing things that are more experience based in life happen when you least expect it, like the magic moments of life. And I can really attest to that. And it's been true for me.
mm. Well, they say the saying, when you're not looking, you find it. Not looking doesn't mean that you're not aware of what you want, because I think in order to be able to identify it when that person comes along, you have to be able to have some sort of criteria. Obviously, knowing the difference between your needs and your wants and what's fundamental to be able to have a healthy relationship. But I think coming any place in anything in life, whether it's business, whether it's friendships, whether it's relationships that are romantic, if you're coming from a place of fear and lack, you are going to attract what you don't need or what you don't want. And when
Mm,
you're coming from a place of abundance, which is usually you don't have this fear of missing out, or you don't have this, I need to quickly date everyone because what if I don't find love,
mm.
or there's no one out there, then it's a completely different attitude. It's a completely different conviction. And our convictions obviously shape our thought patterns, and our thought patterns manifest what it is that we want into our life.
Yeah, I found it really interesting when you said that you have a bond with someone when you're in a relationship, and you mentioned the different layers. Like there's the spiritual bond that you have, there's the emotional bond, there's the physical bond, the chemical bond. There's all these different types of bonds. And I think that a lot of, even with me, there's so many things that I'm not aware of that play out. But one thing that I'd be really curious to get your perspective on is the degree to which relationships are just divinely orchestrated. Like it's, or even if it's not divinely orchestrated, the way that people match together, you just, it's just so crazy how people will consistently attract the same type of people that they would have no idea. And I even me, like I had no idea, how do I happen to attract someone that reflects or triggers my own deep insecurities from childhood and creates that, like, just it just couldn't be planned if it was tried. Like, it's just so divinely orchestrated for you to find people that just match all those different layers of the parts of who we are, like our spiritual selves, our emotional selves, our physical selves. There's just all these different layers in which we attract someone, and then they happen to just fit in a certain way. So what would you recommend to someone to do? Let's say they weren't fresh out of a breakup, and they aren't in that category of needing some time to process like I am. If you were talking to someone who just wanted to attract their ideal partner, what sort of activities do you get them to do to be able to, to be able to figure out what their unhealthy patterns are, to then be able to create some more, I'd say, calmness or detachment, healthy detachment from being able to repeat these same kind of toxic patterns that play out in relationships in terms of who they attract or how they behave in those relationships?
I think one of the good ways to understand why you're in a certain position is look at who you've been dating in the past. And it's almost like do a little bit of a mug lineup and look at, okay, what are the similarities
The
between this
mugs from
person
the
and this
past.
person and this, right? It's like a criminal lineup. Okay, so why was I attracted to this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy or this girl, whatever?
Yeah.
And try and find the similarities between not only their personality traits, but also their physical traits as well. Okay. Because someone's character can also be shown through their physical appearance. For example, if you are someone that is really into older men, okay, and I'm talking like maybe 15, 20 year age gap, obviously their physical trait will be, okay, maybe they've got gray hair, they've got a couple of wrinkles. Why is it there? Maybe it's because you were abandoned by your own father, okay? And so, you have this sense of abandonment issues, and so you're looking for this father figure to be able to replace that. It's something that it takes self-reflection, obviously, and I think it takes education. I think a lot of people are out there and they're dating and they recognize, okay, well, there's some sort of pattern going on here. I'm obviously dating people that can't commit, or I'm dating narcissists, or I'm self-sabotaging, right? I'm pushing away the people that I know are actually good for me. You have to look at the why. And it was always, okay, why is this happening? Why am I in this position? Now, the why doesn't necessarily mean that you need to dissect yourself in order to be able to receive love. And one of the frustrating things is I get a lot of women who come to me and they're like, I've seen therapists for years, I've seen psychologists for years. I even coach now psychologists and therapists myself. And they're just like, dissect. What do I need to change about me to be able to be worthy of love? What do I need to do to be able to receive love? And if you become so focused on feeling that you have to cure yourself in order to be able to receive love, you've missed the whole point in the first place. I personally believe, as a Christian woman, that love is there for you. You've been created to receive love and give love. It's just a matter of stepping into that. Now, obviously, there's some level of accountability. We need to make sure that we're meeting heart to heart, not wound to wound. And meeting wound to wound is not being aware of who you are and also not being aware of what is fundamental to attracting and building a healthy relationship. People have been given access to dates, and they've confused access to dates with access to love. And so they're going on there, they're on Tinder, they're on, all these different dating apps, and they're just like, yeah, I'll swap. Why haven't I still found love? And we have to understand that just because you've been given access to something doesn't mean that it doesn't come with responsibility in
Mm.
choices. So going, okay, I want to go out there and date someone. I'm attracted to tall, dark, handsome men who like motorbikes and are a bit of an alpha male. He's not always available. So I love the chase. I love the drama. Why do I like this? And this is where it comes and goes, okay, well, do you realize if you go down this path, this is the consequence of this? If you go down this path, this is the consequence of this. And it's almost like
Mm.
we have to learn to fall in love with what and who is good for us, which takes discipline. And it also takes a little bit of rewiring our brain. Now, the way that we do that is we don't obviously force ourselves to go, well, I'll just settle for commitment over chemistry, but understanding, okay, why do I feel this pull to someone that I know is emotionally unavailable? You
Mm.
know, is it because, okay, maybe I never had a father that was available to me, so I've always feel that I have to try and win or prove or achieve or
Yeah.
perform for somebody's love? Obviously, okay, that's not healthy. Right. I've got the understanding of the why. I don't necessarily need to dissect it even further. What I need to
Yes.
do is put actions into place that help rewire my brain to say, no, 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 this is what real love is. This is how a healthy love should be. And that might be
Mm.
something as simple as getting out of your comfort zone and saying yes to someone that you wouldn't normally say yes to,
Mm.
because you're now basing it not necessarily an attraction or chemical physical attraction straight away. You're basing it on character. You're basing it on,
Yeah.
hey, this guy was actually a gentleman. He actually called in advance instead of just leaving me hanging. I might get to know him more. And
Yes.
giving yourself a chance. I'm not saying you have to force feelings. There still needs to be attraction there and
Yeah.
chemistry there. It is a fundamental. However, I think you have to look beyond just that, because you can't just always rely on, well, I'm attracted to this, therefore that's all I can have because that's all I want. You
Yeah.
know, it has to
See,
be
this
something
is
more than
easy for you to say when you and Stan are the hottest couple on the planet.
that. Look, well, I went through a lot of crap to get that. Funny enough,
I'm just joking.
when you talk about divine connection, I also believe that if you have a desire in your heart, that desire is an indication of what is meant to be fulfilled. And
Mm.
so if you have a type, let's talk about types here. For me, a type, I knew I needed to be with a leader. And it was always, if I could sum up one word that of a man that I want to be with, it is a leader. And then
Mm.
I think about, okay, what does a leader encompass? A leader doesn't encompass someone who's arrogant and who bosses someone around and who's a bad boy who commands attention. A leader is someone who has a strong sense of identity. A leader is someone
Mm.
who's able to adapt. A leader is someone who's able to grow. A leader has a sense of kindness in them. You know, we've got to look at, okay, what if we to break it down a little bit, because that will help you then identify the difference between, if you've got two males in front of you, they're both alphas, which one is going to have the real qualities of someone that is actually able to give you a fundamental healthy relationship. And look, I
I'd,
went through
I'd,
10 years.
I'd love to
Done.
jump in and summarize some of this because you've gone through so much powerful stuff
Mm,
here. So essentially, you do a mug lineup. You get all the mugs you've
mm,
dated in the past, and you just put them in a line, and you go, what are the patterns here? What have I
mm,
attracted? And
mm,
you don't get yourself in this state where you obsess over like just studying it to the point that you just
mm,
like, feel like that things have to be perfect until you can find love. But you
mm.
look at where the real core problems have continued to show up. So if you dated someone that's treated you in the wrong way, like what are the big kind of obvious standouts here? And then what
Yeah.
are what are the big obvious problems, and what are the nuances and the patterns that you can see within those problems? And so
Mm,
once you've done that, then you can kind of just do some logical thinking around maybe why have you attracted that. But then on the same token, like once you can see the pattern, you still might have a desire for a certain kind of person. It's not saying that that desire is wrong, but it's looking at the healthy conscious
mm,
element to that desire and being able
mm,
to chunk up. And because let's say, for example, for me, I could desire to be with a woman that's very sexual, but there's
mm,
like, from a data perspective, there's like a level 1 sexual woman that's like, uh, using sex as a way to get and manipulate.
mm,
And then there's a
mm,
woman that's level 2 that suppresses her sexuality and goes, no, I'm not sexual. I kind of, going to put on my business shirt and that's all. And
mm.
suppresses her sexual. And then there's a level 3 woman that actually wants to give sexuality, like wants to embrace the sexual element of who she is. And she's really in touch with her sexuality in a really healthy way. And so it's just like
mm,
looking, how
mm,
can you find the conscious version of what you desire, and what do you really desire there? Like, what's
mm.
the real, like, if you would go deeper there, or more conscious or more heart-centered within that, in a way where you were actually going to be treated in the most amazing way, what would that person look like, so that you can potentially then make some more healthy choices moving forward with that?
And I think it's not just desires. This is where people get tripped up. Can't just be desires. It has to
Mm,
also be needs. And needs are necessity. Needs are, this is fundamental. Okay, for example, you have a desire to be with someone that is quite sexual, okay? Because you want to have a lot of sex in your marriage or your relationship, okay? Now, sex is obviously a necessity in a relationship to be able to keep recreating that bond between two people and to be able to enhance intimacy, okay? Because
mm.
you can still have intimacy without sex. The difference
That's
is,
exactly right. For me, it's about pleasure.
yeah,
Sexuality is about like actually prioritizing deep connection and pleasure, and sex, that could be in sex or it could be outside of sex.
right. So the want is the amount of sex, the need is the quality of sex.
Mm,
Okay, so the wants are like added bonuses. For example, if a woman is like, okay, I want to have a guy that is, a great, just a genuine guy, a great guy that maybe is, doesn't have children. Okay, he's not a single dad. He doesn't have children, so he's ready to have his own or something like that.
mm-hmm.
That is, a desire that you have. Now, the need out of that situation would be, okay, who is he as a person? Is this someone that is able to give you the fundamentals of a relationship? Is he someone that treats you right? Is he someone that, because a girl might end up meeting a single dad who's absolutely an amazing person, and she's like, oh, no, but he has children, his children. It's like, hey, but how does he handle that situation of having children? And does it directly affect the quality of your relationship? So I
Mm,
think, like, we can't just keep going, this is what I desire, because what I find people do is especially nowadays, because there's so much
mm,
coaching out there and things like that, and everyone's like, just manifest. I'm like, no. Let's get back to the fundamentals here, because this is a relationship.
this is real
And
talk.
that's right. This is like, it's kind of like back to school, people. No, but it's true, because there's a lot of woo-woo stuff out there where it's like, no, you
Mm,
just need to go with feelings. No. You need to go with facts as well. You need to balance it out with facts. There are
yeah.
certain fundamental things that are needed to make a relationship healthy, because we are humans and we have fundamental needs, and a
Mm,
relationship has fundamental foundations that have to be there. And if one person has it and the other person doesn't, that is never going to work. If two
yes.
people have it, they can make it work. It can't just be based off, I need someone that is sexual. I need to know, what is the quality of the sex? Does it enhance intimacy? Because
Mm,
intimacy is what keeps a relationship alive, not sex.
yes.
Okay. And on top of that, because
Totally agree with that.
intimacy is vulnerability, intimacy is trust, intimacy is being able to talk about things, intimacy is affection, intimacy is being able to understand each
This is
other when nothing is
juicy.
said.
So it's about going into, it's about asking the why. So it's like, instead of just being like stuck on the surface layer things, it's like asking yourself, why do you want that? And what does that really look like? So if a woman wanted to be with a dude that was like really muscly, it's like, why do you want to be with that? Is it because you want to be with someone that you feel safe around? Is it because you want to be with someone that takes care of his health? Like, what's the depth to it, so that you can then have a greater range and you're not just stuck in a box? And you're also
Yeah.
like seeking that, you've got more clarity in what you're really looking for, not what you're kind of like short-term gratification is seeking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
like, for me, I was always like, well, talking about muscles, um, I always dated men that had super muscly hot bodies.
Mm.
Um,
It's because you're a model as
and
well yourself. So you would have.
no, well, funny enough, I wasn't really into the models. No, it was because my father was really into fitness, to be honest.
Mm,
My dad was this hero to me growing up, even though he wasn't an amazing father growing up, but he was someone that was really into fitness. I started doing weights when I was 12 years old because my dad was doing weights. Like, I was like, I'm into fitness. I appreciate the discipline behind that. For me, it's not, ooh, sexy muscles. For me, it's, ooh, that person's mindset represents that they have discipline when it comes to their
Yeah, and
body,
I really
that they
know you,
care about their health.
yeah, I really know that to be true with you as well. I just couldn't
Mm.
see you really giving that much of a shit around someone's muscles.
No, I mean, I really appreciate it, and I love it. But for me, it's not necessarily just because of a sexual thing. It's because that is a mindset
Mm,
thing.
yeah,
So I
it's
think,
so powerful. So it's asking the
mm,
why behind what you're looking for, really getting to
mm,
the crux of it. That's such an awesome point. I
mm,
really love what you said as well about not just being stuck in infatuation with what you're looking for, but understanding what that really means. So if you're like, I want
yeah,
this, I just want this guy to sweep me off my feet. It's like, well, you're looking at the benefits of the situation, but you're not also looking at the drawbacks that will come from that same situation.
yeah,
So you've got an imbalanced perception, which means you're going to go in, be disappointed because you ultimately never saw the full picture. And now you see the
mm,
full picture and you think this guy just has something wrong with him, or this girl has something wrong with them. Now I'm just going to go
mm,
look for the same thing, when you've got an
mm.
imbalanced perception of what it means to be with this type of charactered person.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why setting the pace is really important when you first start dating,
Yeah.
because it gives you a time to be able to sit back and assess the process and assess that person's character.
Yeah, I would never have done that in the past. And like, I couldn't even imagine myself not doing that. It'd be almost impossible once you kind of like have awareness over the importance of like the deeper dynamics in the relationship. Because with Danny and I,
Mm,
on paper, we're both really beautiful, conscious people that care a lot about each other and care a lot about similar things. Like our visions are so similar, but there's an emotional disconnect,
mm,
and it's not something that you would figure out until you past the honeymoon phase necessarily, or without at least having that depth and that understanding of what you really want and why you really want it. I kind of like just skipped on through this sort of stuff, didn't really take
mm.
time. um, and I think, like, I can imagine that would be pretty normal for most people. So what are the kind of parameters around that you suggest? Like, do you have any basic guidelines around how people should approach dating?
Yeah, I think, taking time to get to know someone's character and their default is basically who they really are. Okay. So
Yeah, I
their
love that.
preference is who they are when they're not on their best behavior, when they're not trying to win you over, which is
Yeah.
basically when the honeymoon period stops. Okay.
Yes.
And typically the honeymoon period lasts usually about 2 years. Now, I believe that if you have a level of awareness about yourself because of what you've chosen in the past and where you're at, and you're consciously growing within yourself, it will also help you give you awareness of the person that you're with and their character and where they're at. Now, I say that the biggest indication that your relationship is healthy is there's two things: there's peace and there's progress. Okay.
Mm.
Peace doesn't mean that there won't be absence of conflict. Conflict is healthy in a relationship and conflict is necessary. How that person handles conflict will affect whether or not there is peace, and whether or not there is unity in your decisions and your morals and the way that you're heading, and that connection will also affect whether or not there's peace in your relationship. Progress is obviously you're still growing and they're still growing. It's not one person's outgrowing the other. It's not you're growing in different directions. Progress is you're both moving in the same direction. Now that's not always going to happen. There will be moments where maybe you'll grow a little bit more and then she'll grow a bit more, and then you kind of find where that even ground is,
Yeah.
and you move, and
I've
that
heard
takes
this referred to
communication.
as the slinky effect, where
Yeah,
it should be like one comes up and then the slinky kind of comes together and the other comes up and then the slinky comes together and the other comes up, and it could be either or. Whereas like I've
and
definitely, like if I do my little mugshot lineup, it was definitely like finding people to save. And
yeah,
that's kind of like, that's been my pattern. And as a result, the slinky has not been always been balanced. It's the most balanced that it's ever been with Danny. It was pretty
yeah,
fair. But definitely that's the mug trend for me.
yeah. And the thing is that people often think, well, you can have growth in one part and he can have growth in another part. You don't always have to have growth in the same parts.
Mm,
Sometimes growth individually in separate areas helps bring the unity in that relationship and brings the balance in the relationship. I was saying to a client the other day, I was like, you know, balance in a relationship is different to making up for someone else's lack.
mm,
Okay. So for instance, masculine balances feminine. Okay. having someone that is overbearing, someone that is being aggressive, and then you're trying to make up for that lack within them by turning into a doormat and doing whatever they want, or being over nurturing or things like that. That's not healthy balance in a relationship.
What are some examples of some healthy balances?
That is you compensating for their lack.
Yeah.
So balance would be, okay, for example, I'll use my own relationship. Stan is someone that is quite hits everything on the head, likes to be able to make a decision, and very confrontational. Okay, very like, he's a true leader. He's like, was in the army for 11 years as an officer, and he's been in some pretty full-on fights, and served in Afghanistan, and has had a lot of like, make quick decisions like this, blah, 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 blah. For me, whilst I'm a leader, my way to lead is also to sit back and to have wisdom and perspective. And so my way to bring balance to his, let's do this, blah, 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 is to go, okay, let's think about it for a second. Let's look at all things. Let's not react. Him is react, because in the army, you have to react. You have to think. Let's go. My way is, I'm going to respond. I'm going to take a moment to think about it. Let's look at it from this perspective and this perspective. Let's just take time. Let's take 5 minutes to sit down and think about it and talk about it. And then let's choose a response that's going to serve the situation best.
Yeah.
So, a man's role, let's say biologically and scientifically, is to be able to, to conquer, to go out and fight and to make territory and to hunt. A woman is to nurture, to be able to bring that feminine energy of nurturing and taking that moment to calm him down. If someone is overly heightened in a relationship emotionally because they're triggered by situation, balance would be, okay, how do I bring this back to level ground again? Compensating for someone's irresponsibility or someone's lack would be dismissing toxic behavior in order to be able to just try and keep
the peace.
Yeah.
Fake peace, because then it builds resentment and it pushes problems down, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I think this conflict was something that Danny and I struggle with a bit. And I think it's for the reason that you're mentioning here. I don't want to go too deep into it for our specific situation yet, but I would love for you to give your tips around conflict resolution. What do you believe people need? Because you mentioned peace and progress being the two really fundamentals to a healthy relationship. And I love those, because what I found is, while there are the love languages and how do you sweep each other off our feet and have the dream relationship and whatnot, the basics, without the basics, those things, I created a little bit of a quote, which was, trust precedes fantasies. And that's really true for me in a relationship. So I would love to get your kind of what you would prescribe for both people to have as a baseline, or any guidelines around healthy communication or conflict resolution.
So conflict is healthy. Conflict is an indication that there needs to be some more communication. Conflict is an indication of unmet expectation, right? And so it's something that don't necessarily see it as a barrier, see it as a way into something. Okay. Now, how someone handles conflict will determine whether or not that relationship can move and grow through conflict. For example, if you have someone that just shuts off, that becomes really difficult to be able to deal with what needs to be dealt with, because they're just emotionally blocking. If you have someone that becomes aggressive and abusive through conflict, obviously that's very toxic and it's not healthy. Okay. And it can be very detrimental and impose trauma. Conflict is something that I believe needs to be handled almost like a terrorist and a friend at the same time. Okay. So there needs to be this balance. For example, there's a certain way to communicate with men as you would with women. For men, I have a little formula that I tell all my women, and that is the first thing you need to do is affirm, because I believe that the strongest love language of a man is words of affirmation. Then you
We want to be
need to...
appreciated. We really want to be seen and appreciated.
Exactly. So let's say, for example, he's not doing anything around the house. He's not helping out with chores. Okay. Typical sort of like resentment that will build up inside a woman. Like, oh, crap, why is he not doing anything? Blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Guilty on that front.
Right. So going in and accusing him or attacking him is going to make him put his walls up. He's going to say, hang on a second, you don't see what I do, like you said, because men need that affirmation and appreciation, and I'm not enough, or I'm failing, or, you know, like, then he starts justifying, and it all just becomes really messy. And basically she's coming from a place of, well, by you not doing this act, it means that you don't care enough about me in the relationship. And when that's not why he's doing, he's maybe just forgotten because he's busy and he's thinking, well, I do all this stuff instead, you know, and it all just becomes this messy sort of, again, miscommunication and expectation. So what I say is affirm first. I love when you do this for me. Affirm something that he either is doing first, or affirm when he does do something. Okay. I love it when you help me with household chores. It makes me feel like I'm really supported. Okay. The second thing you do is you then example. Okay. Explain. Sorry, you then explain. Men respond more to logic than they do emotion. Don't go and express, you never do this, you always do this, blah, 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 blah. 2 words you should never use in a relationship is never and always. You never do this, you always do that. Right?
I love that.
Okay.
That is such a nugget in itself.
So then you explain, you use logic. You know, I find that, you know, at the end of the day, I'm super busy. I would just really appreciate it if you'd be able to just hang out the clothes, because I'm trying to do this, this, and this. I see that you've done all this, and I really appreciate that you've done all that sort of stuff. But I'm just getting a bit overwhelmed, and it would really help me. Then what you do is you example. You give an example, like, you know, if you can hang out the clothes because I'm just trying to get on dinner because, you know, I feel like I can't do anything. I don't want to burn dinner because I know that, you know, we want to have a nice dinner. Okay. So you're giving an example so that he can logically make something tangible and make sense of it. Then you ask, you don't
I would
accuse,
say with the example
demand.
as well, the more specific, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And keep it simple. Keep it just to like one example. Don't go give an essay. You have to compartmentalize your conversations with men, because they only process so many words, you know, which is normal. So it's okay. It doesn't make men any more simple. It doesn't mean men are trying to avoid conflict or trying to avoid emotions. It just, men's brains are wired differently.
Yeah.
And if we understand as a woman how a man thinks, we're able to communicate in a way that he's able to more likely receive that communication, receive the message behind that communication.
I love that. That's amazing. Do you have any tips for men in the way to communicate to women? I would love to hear that, because that was great.
So I think for men, when it comes to communicating with women, is we talk to you because we want to feel heard. We don't necessarily want you to fix the situation, right?
Yeah.
Men go into, I need to fix this. Women are like, no, you just listen. You just listen. I just need to talk about this. I just need to say what I need to say and release this emotional buildup. Because what happens during puberty is there's a certain part of the brain which then takes a woman's emotion and turns them into words. Okay. So it's a chemical sort of neurological pathway that gets built during puberty. So women learn to be able to express emotions verbally. That doesn't happen for men. They literally learn it. So for us wanting to talk about things, hence why we speak 7,000 more words than a man in a day.
Wow.
It's not because we want you to just like fix it. We just want to talk about it. And we just want you to listen. But the difference is we want you to be actively listening. So things that men can do to show that they're actively listening are things like repeating back to us what it is that we've said.
Yes.
You know, if I've just gone, you know, I just feel like I'm not supported and my girlfriends never call me anymore, instead of a guy going, oh, well, then why don't you just call your girlfriends if you want to speak to them more, you know, or go get some new friends. It's like, you don't understand me, you know, it would be like, I understand. Yeah, you're right. It must be
Yeah.
really like affirming our feelings and affirming what you've heard from us so that we can feel, oh, he understood. Okay, I'm good now.
Yeah. And
And that's
recently,
it.
since I've been embracing emotions more in my life, I know that feeling as well. When I just want to be understood, I literally just want to vent about something or complain about it. And if I'm in an emotional state where I'm looking for just like understanding or support or to feel a sense of connection, if someone then comes in and just, just tries to fix it, it just makes me
Mm.
feel really, like, it just makes the situation so much worse.
Yeah, because it shuts down that release. And that release is there for a reason.
Mm,
Suppression leads to depression. And we need to be able to give ourselves permission to feel what we feel without fear of judgment. And I think one of the
mm,
things, the reason why a lot of people suppress things in relationships is because they're scared that they don't have that safe ground to be able to be who they are in front of that person, because they'll fix them, or they'll try to judge them, or they'll try to change them, or they'll try to educate them and correct them. And as a coach, and a leader, one of the things you have to be aware of, especially as a relationship and dating coach, is that I don't turn into a coach for my own fiance. I have to
yeah.
understand that there are times where even when I want to say, well, you could just do this and this and this and this. And I remember back in the day when we went through our own problems, I literally wrote out a list for him. And he's like, that was not the way to do it. This was before I started coaching, guys. So you're happy to know I don't do that anymore. But, it has to be, don't go into rescue mode because this is what you do all the time for work. This
Mm,
is like, because I'm sure there's other coaches out there listening. It's about going, okay, I need to sometimes just be a partner to my partner.
yeah. And sometimes I
Mm,
would ask as well, I'd just say, what specifically would you like from me? Because
absolutely.
sometimes, when I was with Danny, she'd actually want some practical support and like, I just want you to
Yeah.
help me make this happen, and
Yeah.
I'm like, sometimes I'd do the wrong thing. Sometimes I confuse it. She'd say, oh, I want some support. And then so I
Yeah.
start fixing it. She's like, no, I just want you to listen. And sometimes
Yeah.
she'd want some support and I just listen. She's like, just do something for me. Like, make this happen. It's like, man, I'm getting this whole thing wrong.
I can't win.
But then asking made it helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's the thing, like always ask, don't accuse, don't demand. Demand is do this. Asking is, like, what do you think, or is there a better way that we can do this? Asking brings back that balance of we're on the same team here. And that's the thing, you got to look at, it's not me versus you, it's us versus the problem.
I love that. I really love
Mm,
that. One thing that's like stood out for me, really, really massively, because it was a sticking point with my last relationship, is being able to make progress. The peace and the progress piece that you mentioned is so powerful, because for
mm,
us, and I know my best friend and his relationship, they have conflict and they have some wild conflict, and they're conscious people, but they let their emotions out, and
mm.
they always move forward even stronger off the back end of
Yeah,
conflict, which is what it's
yeah,
for. Like, that's what conflict,
yeah,
being in
absolutely.
business has been really helpful for me, because you have to solve things regularly and resolve things regularly with people in the
Mm,
business. And
mm,
if anyone brings something out that's like a resentment they've held on to, or something that was miscommunicated, or a way that they feel, and then it gets resolved, you're actually closer afterwards.
mm.
But yeah, we found it very difficult to do that. And yeah, that's just been really, really powerful.
Look, it depends on the person, like, because you can't control how someone else responds to conflict. You can't control their reaction.
Mm,
All you can do is encourage. And I think, this is why investing in mentorship, counseling, coaching, for me, it's love education. It's being taught how to make love and life easier. Um, and the more that I do this and the more that I get into it, the more I realize the world just is so in desperate need of some sort of guidance when it comes to
yeah,
fundamentals in love.
yeah.
We go to
We could
university for our career. We,
exactly. We
go
got
to
to
prenatal classes for our pregnancy. But it's like, what are we doing for our relationships?
Yeah, I think we have to drop the stigma. And I think
Mm,
it's like, especially in the older generations, the stigma around coaching or counseling, meaning that there's a really big problem that you should be ashamed
yeah,
about in the
yeah,
relationship, versus proactive. I
mm,
have coaches in pretty much every area of my life. I always do,
mm,
which makes it so much easier. I just don't understand how people, and I had a pretty unhealthy upbringing. And so
Mm.
there's, I've arguably got more shit to work through, hence why I've sought out more help. But I can't imagine navigating through life without extra support. It's crazy.
Yeah.
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 Have you seen Brene Brown's Anatomy of Trust video?
No, I don't
Where
think
she
I have.
breaks
No, I haven't seen that one.
one thing I want to bring up that I'd love to get your perspective on, is she's got this process called braving, and there's like this
Mm.
acronym of 7 different kind of pieces that she says are the building blocks of trust. Like if you have these 7 things, these are the different 7 parts of trust, and you need them to have a trusting relationship. And it creates a way to identify where you might not be creating trust, or someone
Mm.
that you're in a relationship with might not be creating trust with you. But the second last letter in the acronym is non-judgment. And you
Mm.
mentioned that before, when you're communicating, like you need to be able to communicate in the relationship with non-judgment to keep the peace. And
Mm.
but a distinction that she says is that if you aren't vulnerable and can't actually share your own problems and talk through them, and this was a bit of a sticking point with me, being kind of like more of like a closed book at times.
Mm.
If you can't share your problems because you think that makes you look weaker or vulnerable in a bad way, you can't not be judging the other person when they do the same with you. You can't. If
Mm.
you inherently believe that it's weaker for you to share vulnerably what's going on for you, then when someone else comes and to console on you, they don't trust you as much, because they know that you ultimately have some kind of judgment. Even if it's on yourself, it's still going to get projected when someone comes to you for support. And so I feel like that vulnerability is so important. And I'm wondering,
Mm.
do you have any do you have a specific way that you suggest that people start conversations or facilitate conversations together in a relationship?
You know what? I think one of the biggest things which isn't talked about enough, which encourages intimacy, vulnerability, trust, and everything like that, is honor. I think
Mm,
that if we actually shift our focus to honoring our partner and them honoring us, when I talk about honor, I mean honor is giving weight to something. Honor is seeing something values or someone's value and recognizing that openly and verbally.
mm,
And I think if we're able to do that, that person feels like I'm recognized here, I'm seen here, therefore I feel safe here. And that
mm,
safety is then what encourages the trust and the vulnerability.
mm.
For
That's
women, an easy way,
proactive. That's
yeah,
something you do proactive, right?
and it's something that is really loving behavior as well. You know, you've got to think about it. It's not just love and feeling. It's like, well, what is love in action? And love
Mm,
in action is something that, again, encourages trust and encourages better communication during conflict. You know, if we understand what love is in an action, like we've pretty much solved most of our problems in a relationship, you know. But
mm,
as the thing is people don't know, aren't aware of what it looks like in action. For example, your husband comes home and you don't even turn your back, like to welcome him or to smile, to say, oh, hey honey, how's your day, sort of thing. You're just doing this, and he comes home, he's like, hey honey, you're like, oh yeah, hi, and you're just busy doing your own thing because you're focused on this and that. For me, that is dishonoring behavior. You
mm.
know, I always make a point whenever Stan walks through the door, it's like seeing him for the first time. Not every
Wow.
single time, like, oh my God, I don't worship him and put him on a pedestal. I'm not saying put your partner on a pedestal. That is unhealthy. What I'm saying is acknowledge them even in the simple ways. It's like when a dog hasn't seen you for 2 minutes and then it sees you, it's like, oh my God, how much love do you feel from a dog, right? You know, you've got
Yeah.
dogs, you're just
Dogs
like
are
that. It's
amazing.
just like, they're just awesome. They make you feel so loved, so prioritized, so valued every single time. Why? Because they
Yeah.
give you their attention.
And I feel safest, and I know most people feel safest around their dog,
Yeah,
because
because
there's just unconditional love, and
exactly.
and they really do
And
honor you.
and that's the thing, like simple things like acknowledging someone when they walk through the door, acknowledging what they've done. You know, a man honoring a wife would be something as simple as she's cooked a nice meal, actually, instead of just devouring into it, being like, thank you so much for cooking this. This is a really great meal. You know, still Stan, every single meal that I cook, he's like, Shay, this is really nice. And sometimes it's not that nice, you know? And it's not the like, oh, I'm just trying to like say something and being insincere. It's like, no, I see what you're doing. I recognize what you're doing. and I'm trying to place value on you, and I'm honoring that. And that makes you feel like, okay, I feel loved by this person. Therefore, I want to let
Mm,
my walls down and reveal even more about myself to this person, because I feel that who I am is enough. And that's usually one of the reasons why we pull back when it comes to
mm,
vulnerability and trust, because we don't believe that who we are is enough. So
yeah.
therefore, why would we reveal it to someone else? Because it's like putting everything on the line and we're naked there in front of them, you know? It's going, no,
Yeah.
no, no. And so if we can start to nurture an environment that encourages and speaks to them subconsciously and consciously, yes, who you are is enough, I
Yeah.
guarantee that there's going to be way more vulnerability and trust and desire to want to be more vulnerable with each other without forcing it out of the other person.
Yeah, I would love for you to talk. That's beautiful, right? This whole interview has just been like boom, 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 just power packed knowledge bombs just being dropped like crazy, and I just want to keep milking you for these knowledge bombs. Um, so what was I going to say there? So what would you? Oh yeah. So when it comes to living in a relationship, in this, I feel like the world's getting more busy. We're trying to fit more things in. We have our health to take care of, and we're all expected to be like, fitness
Mm,
athlete style with our health. It's like we're all expected to have great relationships with our family and have a big friends group. There's so many, and thrive in our careers. And there's just a lot more
mm, mm,
demands that we all have. And I know for me, I definitely struggled to get the balance right between living my own life
mm,
as an individual and then living fully in the relationship, and then having my partner also live her full life. And just could you talk to any tips that you have around how to balance, what that balance can look like in terms of having the courage to kind of, because for me, I was nervous sometimes that I was going to upset my partner if I went and took myself away for a weekend, for example. You talk
mm.
about like how that can be healthily established, getting like keeping yourself, being yourself, keeping your own independence and your own personality alive in a relationship.
Mm. Well, I think that it's very important that each person has their own a strong sense of identity and strong sense of purpose before they get into a relationship.
Mm,
Um, and then that is nurtured. And I believe that if you do have a strong sense of purpose and a strong sense of identity, it also help you choose a better partner who will nurture that within you, who won't try to take it from you, or again, they'll cling to your identity because they haven't found their own. So I think, wanting to build a healthy relationship starts obviously with yourself. It starts with
mm,
going, okay, what is it that I want in life? What's my sense of contribution? What is it that I'm doing? Who am I outside of love? Who am I outside
mm,
of attachment? And then when you align with someone, again, setting the pace in the beginning of the relationship. And what I mean by setting the pace, I mean, only see each other once a week for the first 4 weeks. Only see each
mm,
other maybe 2 times a week for the next 4 weeks. Um, no going over to each other's house, no going into that familiar relationship territory before you get to know them. Try hold back on the first kiss for at least the first 2 to 3 weeks if you can. Delaying things, delaying
wow.
rush, delaying the sexual chemistry in a way that then confuses your character assessment of the person that you're with. Okay.
Yeah, wow. That's
Um,
really powerful because I don't think many people would do that.
no, no. And it's difficult to do, especially when you really like someone. And then of course, like the more that you can't have it, the more that you want it, and that's why, like, if you've got your own thing going on, and you're still doing that whilst you're still getting to know someone, it automatically helps to create that balance. It's
Mm,
not about prevention. It's not about, adaptation. It's about prevention. We shouldn't always be just doing damage control. If we know how to prevent certain things from happening right from the start, then we're not finding that we constantly have to adapt. The
mm,
only thing that you should really be adapting to in a relationship is when things happen out of your control, right?
mm.
Circumstances, maybe family death, a job loss, things that, will maybe be triggered as well, because as you get to know that person, maybe PTSD will come up because of an event, again, triggers it, this and that. That should be the
Yeah.
adaptation part. You shouldn't be going into a relationship and going, oh, but who am I now that I'm in a relationship? That ideally is stuff that you should be able to figure out beforehand if you want to set yourself up for a healthy relationship. I understand that there's people who get into a relationship without having love education first, and then they do have to adapt. But I think setting the pace, again, helps you still keep you in amongst building a we. I think that having social circles, the girls she has her friends, you have your friends, you have friends that you create together, and you still nurture those different areas of your life. I think, again, use conflict as a signal that something's thrown off balance. For example, if you're fighting because of just like the littlest things, maybe that's an indication that you need to have a bit of space apart. What happened was during quarantining, obviously a lot of couples were put together, and that relationship either completely fell apart or it got stronger.
Yeah.
Because people were forced into an unnatural situation, which was, okay, spend 24/7 with each other every day, all day in a tiny room. Don't go see your friends. Don't go to your different work environments. Just be with each other. We're not designed to do that, you know. And so you need to, if you're finding that you're in a situation, for example, if you have a husband and wife who work together, you own your own business, right? So you're in the same environment altogether. Find times where you can go and even to separate rooms. So you've got at least some physical space to start the mental space that you might need to process some things to feel that you can get your own balance or just recenter back to yourself.
Yeah, that's beautiful advice. And the proactivity there around for the first, and it's very clear as well. So for the dudes watching, they're going to be like, yeah, I can follow that. 1 catch up a week for the first 4 weeks, 2 for the next 4 weeks, and then just kind of going from there. And also not escalating things too rapidly. And this is if you're looking for your, your divine life partner, right? Some people might want to go out there and have more casual relationships, and it would probably apply a little bit differently there.
Yeah, it depends. Like, everyone's different and what they want. I think for me, there's no such thing as casual sex. I believe attachments are formed every time that you have sex with someone. Yes, but I understand that people, as long as you're communicating your expectation of that casual relationship to the other person, because you're not the only person in that relationship, even though it's not a committed relationship, then okay. And at least you're being honest and transparent about what it is that you want to someone else.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, cool. This has been incredible. I feel like we could talk for absolutely hours on end about this stuff, and I've gotten so much value from this myself. So thank you so much. I've got one more question that I'd love to ask, but before I do, where are people best to find you online? Like, where would you like to direct people to be able to thank you for your time and reach out if they'd like to do coaching with you, or just to say what they learned from the interview?
You can either go to my Instagram, which is just my name, Renee Slansky, or my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Renee Slansky.
Yeah, you've got quite the following on YouTube, don't you, as well?
Yeah, I think it's 81,000 or something like that.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's and look, I it's not that I'm slack with content. I'm so busy with clients and everything at the moment. It's more for me, I try to get out a video once a week. Sometimes I don't, and that's purely because I'm not just going to put stuff out for the sake of putting stuff out. I like that. For me, I'm passionate about love education. I'm passionate about educating a generation on how to love effectively and love in the way that love's meant to be done.
Yeah, amazing. So I would encourage everyone to at least jump on Instagram and follow Renee Slansky. It's RENEESLANSKI. Is that right?
Why?
I was like, wow, if I nailed that, I would have been impressed.
No, me too.
So go check out Renee on Instagram, but send her a message. And there's still another question I'm going to ask you, but I just wanted to make sure that people got across and could send you a message to say, I know for me, I love getting messages from people that, especially if there's something meaningful that was said that made a difference for you, just send a message and just say thanks.
Absolutely.
And if you got questions about coaching, it would, Renee's an amazing coach, very fully booked at the moment, but would always welcome an inquiry. And before we jump into the last question, I want to honor you, Renee, because you're such a phenomenal leader. You just mentioned your mission right there about educating a generation on what healthy love looks like. You're such a beautiful balance between being a powerful woman and a leader, being a feminine woman, and then also being able to have this beautiful integration between those two where you've got the maturity. And I feel like that's a lot of thing that's it's a little bit lacking in this at the moment. People are either like really rigid, or they're like hypersexual, and it's just like putting things in a really balanced perspective, in a really mature way. And there's so much wisdom there and so much maturity. Like I was saying that before the call, like you're really
Thank
mature.
you.
It's phenomenal. And I just want to say thank you for being such a devoted coach. And I was Renee's first ever client, by the way, guys.
You are?
And you're an amazing coach. So for me just to jump in and be your first client, and then for you to, like, I would have had no idea that you hadn't done that before in that capacity.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've just done so incredibly well over the last 4 or 5 years, how long it's been. And, I'm so grateful for all your coaching and what you've done for me. And you just do phenomenal work. So thank you for being you, and thank you for coming on today.
Thank you.
My pleasure. So my last question is, if a student came to you, or like a prospective student, and said, hey, I want to give you $1 million, and I genuinely am going to give you $1 million, and all I want in exchange is one either activity to do, or piece of advice to give, but I just want one thing from you, what you would consider to be the most valuable thing that you could possibly offer me for $1 million, what would that one piece of advice be?
Oh gosh, that's so relevant to the person.
Totally. I usually pre-frame that, by the way. And if you can't get to know them and you don't know anything about them, it's just.
Gosh, to generalize it in one sentence, you are your own rescue.
How?
And that's, it's something that, especially for women more so, they're always looking for the Prince Charming and wanting to be rescued and this and that. It's like you are your own rescue. You are your own fairy tale. And I think practically speaking, so that's like the quote of the day, but practically speaking, get educated. Get love educated. There is so much free love education out there on YouTube, books, this and that.
There's this awesome YouTube channel called Renee Slansky.
Yes, I know this channel.
80,000 subscribers, so many amazing videos. Just go divulge that. Just go get in.
I think it's really difficult to put it into one phrase, because men are different to women, and it really depends on the person. I find that usually with each person that I speak to, there usually is one thing that they need to focus on for where they're at right now.
But that I get, like, what you're saying is like the answer is in you, not in someone else. And that's the most powerful thing, because I know from working with you, I know that when we started working together, there were so many practical tips and advice you'd give me around, I should, even to the detail of, I should message back saying this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But ultimately you were fundamentally getting me to understand how I can love myself and heal myself and, become more confident in who I was and grounded and worthy in who I was. And then taking that to a relationship. So there were true healthy individuals that could come together and love each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Progress isn't pretty. Purpose is a lifetime destination that we never arrive at. All these things that it's just like love is something that needs to be done in action, not just felt. I mean, there's just so many things that it would be really too hard.
You've just written a mini quote book that we can
exactly
put back into this.
My new lead generation.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I've had an absolute blast. Really appreciate it, Renee.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I always love talking to you, Ryan, and it's just been amazing watching your journey grow through everything, like I said, business, personal development, relationships, and just want to honor you as well for the people that you lead, for stepping out into this podcast, for following your heart, for going into that zone that causes even more growth in areas that, that can trigger anxiety. I think that, it takes courage, and I think that there's still so much greatness to come for you as well.
Thank you so much, Renee. Massive love.
My pleasure.